Smooth Productions.
Today I'm speaking to Seth Pogue, who was served in the Marines and was a member of the infantry, and I met him while I was at Standing Rock for several days at Campo City Second Wing, and he agreed to speak to me. He actually returned home for several weeks, and I do appreciate you being here, Seth. And again, I'm sure that you have a lot to talk about your time there, and we'll try to get into all that today.
Thanks, man.
And did you want to talk a little bit about your time in the Marines before we got right into Standing Rock and what brought you uh, to the camp and how you learned about it?
I was in the service from 2007 to 2010. I was medically discharged due to injury that I sustained while in. Um, like you said, I was infantry, 0351 assaultman, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, Retreat Hell. And I joined the Marines, Semper Fidelis. It means always faithful to our oath, to our corps, to our country. And I went out to Standing Rock with the thousands of other veterans because we understood that what our oath means, and you're supposed to defend the Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic. Second to that, you obey orders of those placed above you. And the reason it's specifically worded that way, it's put second that way, is because those domestic enemies can be people who are put in charge above you. And the Nuremberg trials that backs it up, when Nazi soldiers were saying, well, I was just following orders, that's why I killed all those families. It wasn't a legitimate excuse, because you knew it was wrong, you knew that it was an unlawful order. And that's why I ended up going out there. And enjoyed my time out there greatly.
And how did you first hear about the Veterans Standing For and everything that was going on at in North Dakota?
Well, I've been following the Standing Rock protest for quite some time, pretty much from the beginning, and seeing the escalation of force from all the reports that were coming out. And then, like, once I actually got out there, you find out it's actually a lot worse than what everything has been reported. You find out at what lengths this company and law enforcement is going to suppress people's rights and freedoms. But back to your question, I found out about the Veterans Stand for Standing Rock on Facebook. I saw some posts coming out. I started looking into it. I emailed to get on the roster, and was told some people would be getting in contact with me, and that never happened. And I wasn't just gonna sit around. I figured I'd go out there and meet up with them, so that's what I did.
And that is where we did end up meeting. And about the escalation of force there, and I heard from a number of veterans myself who were saying that some of the weapons, from the gas to concussion grenades, these are basically even these are against the Geneva Conventions using this, but they were doing this against American citizens, and seeing that on camera, and so many outlets in North Dakota and major outlets here backed by major corporations are refusing to even mention the force. Is that frustrating when you see that and still see basically a mainstream media blackout on exactly what is happening on the ground there?
Well, I mean, Yeah, frustrating is probably too too small of a word for it. I mean, when when we go fight overseas, we're told that we're going to fight and secure American rights and freedoms. Many of us coming back home are realizing that we have even less rights and freedoms than when we left to go fight. Um, when you see your brothers and sisters die on the fields, and again, you're doing this for those rights and freedoms, and you come back and you hear people say, "I support the troops," or any of this, and yet there is no huge outcry when our government's constantly violating American rights and freedoms. The Constitution is quite clear that we have freedom of speech, we have the right to assembly, we have the right to protest. Uh, we have a free press, or we're supposed to have a free press. Um, so yeah, when I actually got out there and I started talking to the medics who have been out there since day one trying to help and pull people off the front lines and give them medical treatment, they've told me that every time they're having to go on to the front lines and pull people back, they're being targeted by sharpshooters with rubber bullets, just a constant gunfire, stream of gunfire on them. When I told other veterans who went out to Standing Rock, uh, they and myself, we didn't hesitate in volunteering to take those rounds for the medics, to hold shields up, to be their armor. Um, like the simple targeting of medics is a war crime. Um, there's a federal no-fly zone over Standing Rock, which I got pictures of myself just on my cell phone. Every single day they're violating that airspace. Um, it's crazy the amount of. I mean, they're blockading a highway and have been for over a month. Just blockading a highway. You have the right to travel unmolested in this country. So yeah, it is pretty aggravating. It's pretty frustrating um, to see all of these things, to see all of these rights and freedoms be violated, and to constantly see the "I support the troops," or to be told, like, when people hear I'm a veteran, to be, "Oh, thank you for your service." Like, you understand that you American rights and freedoms aren't being violated overseas, they're being violated here. That means we, the people, have to stand up and start standing up for our rights, start standing up for those freedoms. And like, that was the beautiful thing, was to talk to all of these veterans out there and who understood that legally this government and these policemen and all of these different protests and all of these different laws being passed that are in direct violation of our Constitution, we all understand that legally speaking, we have the right to overthrow this government using whatever means necessary, using the right to bear arms. And it was beautiful to see thousands of veterans, all show up there without weapons, even though we all knew we could. Like, and the simple fact that we're willing to still be peaceful, even though we understand our laws, and even though our laws are quite clear. The Declaration of Independence, which predates our Constitution, is quite clear. Just read the second paragraph. Quite clear on what we're supposed to do when our government is violating our rights or getting in the way of our pursuit of happiness. Um, so yeah, that was the most beautiful thing there that I experienced. I mean, there are quite a lot of beautiful things, but seeing all those veterans with PTSD or bipolar, and none of us were on our meds, and all of us were expecting, like, oh man, this is not a smart idea. Not a smart idea to get a bunch of unmedicated, crazy vets together. But none of us had issues. The medics the medics confirmed that, like, not one of us were on the meds that were prescribed, and none of us had any issues. All of us were at peace. We all understood, like, that this is where we're supposed to be, that this fight, this Standing Rock, is only the first battle, and this revolution that everyone's been talking about. And a revolution doesn't need to be violent or anything like that. Like, the simple fact is that it can be a change of your view, a change of your perspective. And I mean, this is on both sides of the line. Policemen, soldiers on their side, veterans, citizens, whoever you are, regardless of what your color, what your religion, what your uh, political affiliation, it doesn't matter. If you can just step back for a second and realize that this government does not have our consent, then this government has no power. And we are supposed to overthrow a government that does not have our consent, that is not following the wishes of the people. And we're supposed to just put in a government that the people feel will give them the best pursuit of happiness. So, like, the whole idea that people, like, oh, it's going to be this huge bloody thing, and, like, it doesn't have to be. It can be that, but it doesn't have to be that. It can simply be a mind shift where you understand that we are the workers, we're the soldiers, we are everything and they are nothing. How will they be able to transport weapons to the Middle East if we don't load them on the planes or on the ships? How will they accomplish anything? Like, we have all the jobs now. We're making all of the things now. So we can make all those things for each other. Period. And yeah, it might sound all hippie and lovey and blah, 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 but the simple fact is that greed is killing not only us, not only other countries, but this entire world, this entire ecosystem. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting kind of carried away, I guess.
Oh no, no, that was perfectly fine, and everything that you said about the camp and what's happening there is things I experienced myself and saw. Yeah, they began shutting down roads and threatening $1,000 fines on November 29th before the veterans were to arrive, which I'm sure that was not a coincidence. And those were supply lines that could have made easy transport for essential goods needed to survive while on camp during a blizzard. And I met an indigenous family there that would have starved and or froze to death, pick one, because of those supply lines were down if people weren't there to give them food and stuff to stay warm during a blizzard. So that what they're doing is definitely, they don't care about the lives of people there and what they're standing for. And I spoke to medics who was like, yes, that's where you're being targeted. I spoke to civilian volunteers who were helping people on the front line who had been shot with rubber bullets, saying yes, they actually called out my name because they saw me a couple of times before I was shot. And all these things are experiences you learn of when you're at the camp. And I was glad I was there, because it's like what you're seeing. All this is done at the beck and call of a corporation who who is owned by billionaires that just wants to make a couple more $1 billion, and most of the money is going to be in the oil itself is going to be sent out to places not even the United States of America. So that
Yeah.
itself is everything you said there is definitely true, and to me, it's just extremely odd to see all this happening on American soil, because you're correct. Just from my experiences there, is going there, I was like, this is the United States of America. It doesn't feel like it when you are close to Turtle Hill and see all of what's happening on the other side. But when you're walking through camp and speaking to the first peoples there, and seeing all the spirituality there, and like, we want peace. We just don't want them to poison the water, not just for us, but for the rest of the world, because without water we all die. That's why they say water is life, because
Yeah.
it really is life. And if you can't drink oil, I mean, you can drink oil, but you'll die fairly quickly. So that's it's just really strange to see. And why do you personally feel, after, and also before I say that, what you said about being on camp and none of the veterans having PTSD triggered, I've heard that from multiple individuals that were there while they were there and after they were there, that said the same thing. It's remarkable what that surrounding does, and I felt it as well, because it's like, I was like, this is, I've never experienced this type of atmosphere before, and literally just a couple of 100 yards away there are people that literally want to shoot us all. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a very surreal feeling. And if you could speak a little bit more about that, why do you feel that is the case for the camp itself?
Um. Well, there's a couple of different things. I mean, I, like everyone else in this world, has been working for money. But there, I didn't get paid for my services. I did it and seen the people's gratitude, seeing a young mother with her two young children come out of their teepee, and you could tell they were cold, and just, their faces were lighting up. And just like a huge sense of gratitude, and you knew that you were in the right place, that you were doing the right thing. I mean, a lot of people get into charity type work because of that feeling. Like, how awesome would it be if that was your way of life? If that was just common society? You looked out for each other. Um, and when I first got there, I mean, I've lived in pretty large cities, or just urban areas, um, and you don't really talk to people, I mean, who are passing you or anything. And the first couple of days I was there, it was like that. I mean, I didn't know anyone. There was no reason, to say hi or anything like that. But you start going to these prayer ceremonies, and obviously I don't know the language, but these native people will do prayer songs, and it's literally a prayer, done as a song, um, and I mean, most of us had no idea what she was saying, or he, but you could feel what they were saying. You could hear the plea. You could hear that cry for help. Um, I had the great fortune of being able to meet this one native, um, who, like, now I view him as a brother. Uh, his name, he's just he was a great individual, and he, being a native, understood the language and could explain to me what some of these prayers and songs were. And in their culture, they pray to the water. They pray for the water to heal them. And in most of our minds, that would be just completely absurd. But that one doctor, I can't remember his name, but he showed that if you speak to water with different emotions of love or forgiveness or different things, you could actually see the water molecules change under a microscope. If you projected bad feelings towards the water, it would drastically change. And so that shows that there is something to do with that. It shows that these people have been right all along about several different things. Just the native viewpoint of strangers, which I loved as soon as I heard it. The civilized way of looking at strangers is don't talk to them. They could be a murderer. They could be a thief. They could be a rapist. They could be a really bad person. Don't talk to strangers. Beware of strangers. But the negative way of looking at a stranger is go talk to them. That could be your best friend, your greatest ally, a spouse, anything that you just haven't met yet. So just that basic, again, changing your viewpoint is when you start looking out at strangers crossing the street and stuff, and you start thinking that they could be someone who's really beneficial to have in your life, or you might be that person who's really beneficial to them. Instead, in our society, we're taught fear. It's this huge fear mongering. And it's funny that our government has twisted the term terrorism, a terrorist, into what we all know what it is today. If you look at the original definition of terrorism, it was a government commits terrorism on its citizens to scare them into things. And that's what our government does. That's what our media does. I mean, you want to see the real terrorists, go to Standing Rock, see what kind of things are perpetrated on American citizens. I mean, there are veterans still there. There are teachers and doctors and lawyers and EMT and construction and plumbers and electricians. There's all types of people at Standing Rock. And they're all American citizens, and that's how they're being treated. I mean, so yeah, it's that feeling. That feeling is, I mean, the feeling that you all know that you're in this together. That feeling that if one of us is hungry or freezing to death, that any one of us will help you. That feeling. And I mean, I don't really have a word to describe it besides all that.
And I honestly, you're absolutely correct, and that's kind of why I've been extremely outspoken about certain outlets from the LA Times, who I basically caught in an outright purposeful misquoting of a veteran and recorded it, and from other major outlets with billions of dollars behind them, and they still refrain from being journalists and telling the exact truth, or even staying on camp just leaving as quickly as possible, and that to me was frustrating to see, because as soon as there was any talk of a blizzard coming, if you looked up at Media Hill, they're all gone, and I was like, what? There's tents here. You can stay here if you want the real story. I did. I refused to go to the casino. I was like, I wanted to see what is actually happening here, and it's kind of your job as the media, as a journalist, to tell the truth and tell exactly what is happening. But for some reason, there's no interest in doing that for the major outlets, and that's why the videos that have been seen millions and millions of times on Facebook and YouTube aren't shown to a lot of individuals, because it's not in their interest, because they're getting advertisements from oil companies, or certain politicians feel that it's not necessary to speak about, and that's what I wanted to transition into. And you mentioned this earlier when you spoke about politicians saying that they support the troops, and they're pushing for interest of service members. But when it comes to cases like this, I've heard from Tulsi Gabbard, I've heard from Bernie Sanders, and after that, it gets a little bit quiet as far as coming from Congress on what's happening, and what, as a veteran and as someone who saw what's happening at Standing Rock, and which I will definitely say that civil rights abuse is going on. What are your first emotions coming from that, and what does that make you feel from your own representatives?
Well, I mean, I currently live in California. I've been out of the Marine Corps for 7 years now. Well, coming up on 7 years. And this entire time, I've watched the government pass more and more legislation that, in some cases, has even been ruled as unconstitutional, like with ag-gag laws. And every time I saw these things, I would look to America. I mean, politicians, we all know politicians are liars. I mean, the simple fact that, like, that is a saying should in of itself tell you that a politician is not going to fix your problems. It's up to the people. It's up to the people on an individual basis. And when this government passes this legislation that's unconstitutional, and in case if anyone doesn't know what an ag-gag law is and is incapable of doing a Google search and figuring it out for themselves, an ag-gag law is specifically a law that says you're not allowed to speak against or document or film going on in the agriculture business. This was a direct result of, the documentaries that came out, like Farmageddon or Food Inc. and stuff like that, where it showed behind the scenes where your food was being stuffed, cows being stuffed in pens, and they have nowhere to move to even defecate, and their feces is filling up and like touching their bellies and stuff. The food industry is pumping out meat so quickly they're unable to even give them a proper cleaning before sawing them up into meat. So the chances of, feces getting in the meat becomes very high. They have to pump our animals full of antibiotics because of the horrible treatment that they're in. Well, the problem is, nature finds a way. So we're making now super bugs that most of our antibiotics can't, have any fight against. And that's the other thing about Standing Rock. Like, this right now is about big oil, but like the problems that plague our society and the problems that plague our world are much bigger than just oil. They're banks, they're the big agriculture, they're big pharma. Letting private individuals control critical resources that everyone needs is a huge mistake. Huge mistake. So back to your question, you were asking how does it make me feel about the representatives and seeing the civil rights abuse and not seeing any action in government. I mean, yeah, it upsets me, especially when they had to take an oath similar to my oath about defending the Constitution. Um, but let's face it, with the amount of money being poured into government from lobbyists of banks and corporations such as what we're facing out there in Standing Rock, I mean, can you really be surprised? Can you really be surprised that anyone in government has pretty much had to, at one point or another, had to take a lobbyist money?
And that's why money in politics is such a huge problem, and
Oh yeah,
that's why what Bernie Sanders did during the Democratic primary shows that you don't need their money to get people behind you, and hopefully that changes some things, but it hasn't yet. And I mean, what you bring up is just it's the unfortunate truth. There's so much money being dumped into the situation. I personally, I reached out to Morton County Sheriff's Department. I reached out to uh, the North Dakota Veterans Coalition, who said a lot of negative things about veterans coming. They both said they would speak to me. When I called, they neither answered or responded back, and so they know what's happening there, and they don't want it to get it out because they only speak to outlets who will basically be stenographers and just copy down what they say and present it as truth. And many
yeah,
individuals say like, "Oh yeah, since the police said it, therefore it must be true." I was like, there's video evidence showing that what they're saying is complete crap.
yeah,
The sheriff from Ward County said that there was no concussion grenades ever used, despite the video evidence of it and despite the receipts of them being sold to Morton County Sheriff's Department being released. And there's just so much going on there. I still want them to find it in their on their schedule to speak to me, so they can actually have a real conversation rather than someone is writing down what they want out there, because that's not what journalism is. And the biggest issue I find is that the corporations with these big outlets with billions of dollars behind them, they're supposed to be the check and balance on corporations. They're supposed to be the check and balance on politicians, but
yeah,
they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're just copying down what the corporations want them to. So
yeah,
it's up to independent individuals with, quite frankly, not a lot of money behind them. I sure don't to try to go out there and cover these things and get the truth out, and it's extremely difficult to do that. And that's why I'm still not there. I've only been once because of that, and I'm still trying to go back. But it's still important to get those stories out there because they're needed, especially when so many Americans are being misinformed on the issue. I've seen instances of people spreading memes are just like that. None of this is true at all. Like
yeah,
none of this is true at all, or them saying that people there are the quote unquote protesters, the water protectors are violent and have been escalating against the sheriff's department. There was like, hey, that's quite
yeah.
frankly the exact opposite and nowhere near the truth. And how do you combat that as a veteran and hearing some people say these things to you or say that the water protectors are violent and all this stuff that's just not in the least bit accurate?
Well, I got the opportunity to speak when the majority of veterans showed up. We caused a huge influx at Standing Rock, much more than they've ever had there. Uh, reports came out that there were over 10,500 people there with all the vets showed up. Because of that, we started running into a lot of logistical problems, firewood, porta potties, just food, a lot of different things. And so we had a meeting at what in camp has become known as the Sacred Space Dome, which is pretty much the largest dome type tent there. And I got an opportunity to speak, and I told everyone a history lesson, pretty much, and this ties into our laws. And I hear a lot of people say, look, the protesters are getting violent, they're throwing rocks, or they're starting fires, or et cetera, et cetera. When the simple truth is, when the police show up and they block protests and they line off streets and they put up blockades, they're violating our constitutionally protected rights. We have a right to assemble, we have the right to protest, we have the right to travel unmolested in these United States. Now, what can we do about that? What is the appropriate force to overcome that? Well, if you look at history, and this is the story I shared, and it's verifiable, I challenge you to go look it up yourself. It's Athens, Georgia, 1946. World War II veterans came back from war, and they discovered their election process was having the appearance that it was being corrupted, that it was being fixed. There was a carpetbagger who was up for election going against some locals, and the carpetbagger seemed to be winning the election. Excuse me. Carpetbagger seems to be winning the election. A black man comes to one of the polling locations and is going to give his vote. A policeman ends up looking at his ballot or something like that, and he ends up punching the black man in the face or in the chest, and the black man drops his ballot and starts running away. He's like, okay, well, I tried to vote, type thing, and the cop then shoots him in the back. Well, a lot of the veterans who just came back from overseas fighting in World War II, one of the biggest and bloodiest wars this world has ever seen, they didn't take too kindly to that, and they started demanding that the ballot boxes be brought out and they're given a recount to ensure that no corruption is happening, which again is a constitutionally protected right. Instead of doing that, the police and government officials took the ballot box and locked it away in the police station. Well, the commander of the vets told them to go to the other polling location and grab that ballot box and take it to their location, which they did. The government then sent 2 policemen to secure the ballot box from the veterans. The veterans beat those policemen up, they disarmed them, and they arrested them. And they kept them prisoner where they had the ballot box. The government sent 3 more policemen, and the exact same thing happened to them. They sent 3 more, and the exact same thing happened to them again. So all in all, 8 officers have been beaten, disarmed, and arrested and are being kept prisoner by the vets. The vet commander says, okay, well, let's go over to the police station. So they go to the police station, and he yells out and telling them, bring out the ballot boxes. We have a right to recount those ballots and make sure there's no corruption going on. They refuse. The veteran commander turns to his vets and says, go home and grab your weapons. Come back here. Now, at this time, the vets are numbering close to 2,000. So 2,000 vets go home, and they come back with their weapons and begin taking elevated positions and surrounding the police station. The vet commander yells out again, okay, last chance. Bring out the ballot boxes so we can have a recount. If not, we're going to start treating you as domestic enemies to our Constitution, which again falls back to the oath of service. That's what you swore to do. They refuse, and the vets open fire. After the ordeal, the reporter is asking the veteran commander who opened fire first, the police or the vets? And the vet commander, without hesitation, responded and said that he did. I shot the first officer. I shot him in the gut in the street. And then I shot the next officer who tried to grab him and drag him inside. The vets continued to pour gunfire, sustained gunfire on that police station for up to 2 hours. At that time, the vet commander understands, he can't keep this up indefinitely. So he tells his vets to go to the National Guard Armory, go to mining companies, find dynamite and bring it back. And that's what the vets do. They go out and they grab dynamite and they bring it back. And he gets on the bullhorn one last time and yells out to the police station. At this point, there are close to 50 police and something like 13 government officials or something, all held up in the police station that's been taking gunfire for the last 2 hours. And he tells them, this is your last chance. We're going to use this dynamite, we're going to blow open the wall, and we're going to come in, and we're going to subdue you. They refuse. They throw the dynamite, they blow open the wall, and they go in. Not one of those vets ends up being charged. And the reason why is because when they opened that ballot box, there was corruption. The Supreme Court has ruled times in the past that if you see an officer beating someone or unlawfully arresting them, then you're allowed to step in to defend that person being beaten or unlawfully arrested, even up to killing that officer. And that's our law. People need to understand that that's how far we can go and still be within the legal limits of American law, of our oaths. So when I hear of protesters throwing rocks or setting fires, not speaking of Standing Rock right now, even if that is true and there's video of them doing it, the simple fact is the police, when they blockade and they try to stop a protest, they themselves become domestic enemies. Every one of those officers should know the law in order to be able to refuse an unlawful order, such as blocking a protest, such as shooting medics with rubber bullets, such as putting tear gas into water cannons and causing people to have chemical burns because of how cold it is when they're being sprayed, causing people to have frostbite. Like, it's I mean, it really kind of hurts the heart, really kind of hurts the soul, when people are talking about supporting the veterans and, you know, all gung ho about America when they're simply refusing to look at their country right now, to listen to their veterans. I mean, this government and media keep on pushing 22 vets are committing suicide a day, which is a very high rate. I mean, we're losing vets faster now than most of the wars that we've been in recently. Um, but no one wants to talk about the actual issues. I mean, here in California, they passed two anti-gun laws or gun control laws. One being if you have a medical marijuana license, then you're not allowed to buy a weapon because you might be a danger to yourself or others, which is unbelievable. Um, I personally, because I'm a veteran and going through the VA, obviously they didn't condone a medical marijuana license, so I went through 6 different psych medications. One made it so bad that I had to tell my wife to take the dogs and go to a friend's house for a few days. Don't tell me where she's going. Just because I was having daydreams of killing her or my dog in various horrible ways, uncontrollably, getting really agitated all of a sudden. I tried one pill that made me really fat. I tried one pill that made it so I couldn't orgasm, whether I was jerking off or having sex with my wife. I tried one that I ended up being allergic to, and through muscle contractions almost snapped my spine. Um, all of these are pushed by Big Pharma, and constantly they're saying, uh, marijuana is a bad thing. How can it be bad? It grows naturally all around the planet, in every climate on its own. So, I mean, if you believe in God or Creator or anything, you're trying to say that the Creator made a mistake with this plant? That it's a bad thing? No, I refuse to believe that. In fact, when I got my medical marijuana license, I haven't had one issue with, just the craziness that I was going through, the uncontrollable feelings of rage or depression all of a sudden. And I haven't had one issue since I've gone that route. And now I'm having legislation tell me that I'm a danger to others because I chose to go this route instead of taking their drugs. As if that wasn't bad enough, then they decided to pass another law, which is now in effect here in California. And that law is if you happen to be a veteran, let's say, and you're having homicidal thoughts or suicidal thoughts, which a lot of us have, simply because it's a whole nother world trying to get back into the civilian mode of things. Just simple things like communication tends to be really hard for a lot of veterans. we're used to yelling at people and getting a response very quickly, efficiently. You can't really do a lot of those things in the civilian realm, and a lot of people, a lot of vets have problems adjusting back. Um, so let's say you're a veteran and you're like me or any of the thousands of others who have homicidal or suicidal thoughts, and you go to a hospital and you tell them that. Well, legally, they're not allowed to let you leave after saying that you're having suicidal or homicidal thoughts. So then you're faced with two options. You can go into the hospital voluntarily, or they will make you go into the hospital, which is involuntarily. Now, voluntarily, you get to have, rights, and you get to make your own decisions about certain things. Involuntarily, you don't have that option. They decide when you're better or what medications you need to take, etc. How do I know this? I have been locked up in psych hospitals while I was trying all these different meds. I forget how many times. At least five different hospitalizations. Um, and again, ever since I got that medical marijuana card, no problems with that. Um, I But California just passed this law that says, regardless if you have a criminal record, regardless if you went to these mental health facilities voluntarily or involuntarily, just because you go, you are no longer allowed a weapon because, let's face it, you could be a danger to us all. Okay, well, here's the problem with that. Is people like to say freedom isn't free, and when they say that, they're usually referring to the military who is fighting and dying for freedom. But there's also another side of the coin. Freedom isn't free. That also means you have to live with fear. Just because you're in a free country doesn't mean you're free from fear. Like, you live in a country that everyone has the right to buy weapons. Does that mean you should live in complete fear that any one of your neighbors could kill you with one of those weapons? No. But that's how our government and that's how our media spins this. They spin it as if, like, let's face it, if someone went to a hospital and is trying to get treatment, that shows that they're trying to get better. Believe me when I say, if the person wanted to harm others, we wouldn't put a spotlight on our own selves that we're having these thoughts. I mean, I've had the police sent to my house because of people taking my words the wrong way, with me trying to explain, like, look, I've been hospitalized for this kind of thing, and, like, all the side doctors tell me, like, just be open, clear communication with the person, and you can work it out. And then all of a sudden, that person sends police to my house and thinking that I'm going to come kill them. When I answered the door and I saw that cop, I just started laughing, and I was like, when he asked me, are you thinking about harming this person? And I was like, dude, I was in the Marine Corps. If I wanted to harm that person, no one would see me coming. They sure as hell wouldn't have gotten, a nice phone call trying to explain where I'm coming from. But that's how this government, and that's how they use the media. They use it as terrorism. They keep you terrified of all these different things. Why? So they can justify things like the Patriot Act and all these different violations of your right to bear arms or any of these other things. That's how this government and media is operating, and it's really upsetting, man. It's really upsetting to know, people personally who have given their lives for the idea that we were fighting for. And then to come back home and realize that, I don't know how many times I've been called disgrace or traitor to my uniform simply for saying, yo, it doesn't matter if you agree with that protest. You should be for those people's rights to protest. I mean, it's like that saying goes. I may not agree with what that person is saying, but I will fight to the death their right to say it. Like that's the idea. It doesn't matter whether you agree with a protest. When you see those protesters being treated like that, their rights being violated like that, that's what you should care about. And that's part of being an American. You are called to stand up for your own rights. That's why you're given the right to bear arms. That's also why the government is trying to shut it down so hard. People need to start understanding that it's up to us, the individual, if we want this to continue anymore. At some point, we have to say enough is enough and actually, do what we're talking about the whole time. Everyone's waiting for this revolution, civil war to go on. I've been waiting for people to stand up for years. For years, I would post, well, the government's doing this now. Well, are y'all ready to stand up? And usually it's when they touch the guns. And when they touch the guns, it's on. So I hit people up when I found out about California's gun control laws. I hit them up and I said, yo, here are 2 laws that they just passed directly affecting me, a veteran who fought for these rights. So y'all ready to stand with me? No, instead it was, well, dude, you got to get out of California, man. That's a crazy liberal state. Okay, well, here's the thing. It's one of the United States of America, and we are all under the Constitution, period. So when an ag law is shown to be unconstitutional, then the rest of the ag laws should be taken down. But they haven't been taken down, even though one has been shown to be unconstitutional. So when across these states, if one of these states shows, hey, this gun control thing is actually unconstitutional, that affects every other state as well. That is the hierarchy of our law system, our legal system. Everything defaults to the Constitution. So, I don't know, it's really upsetting to see how many people who are just completely disconnected from our actual laws, our actual rights, and what we can do to enforce them.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that is going on. There are definitely there's definitely mental reasons to see why, if someone is, suitable to be around any type of dangerous weapon or operate certain things, but if someone is seeking out to get better for mental health, it's probably not those individuals you need to be looking at, especially if they have shown no propensity to violence. Like, hey, can you please help me with this? It's kind of like a for example, a heroin user who's saying, I need to get help. Instead, you throw them in jail. It's like, what are you doing? That's not the point. But there's definitely individuals who probably like, oh yeah, I threatened to point this gun at my girlfriend's head. It's like, yeah, maybe that person should be a little watched a bit, but that's a
Yeah.
different story. But that's not
I
someone
mean,
trying to get help.
that seems to be another problem in America. We like to try to make these broad generalization laws that are going to affect everyone, equally. But thing is, like, it goes on a case by case basis.
Yes.
There are way too many individual,
There's a lot more nuance that goes into cases like that than just saying this should be broad for everyone. Like, no, because like you said, not every single person that is seeking that has some kind that is said to have a certain mental disturbances for the same reasons. Like yes, there's been a lot of these drugs that big pharma pushes that shows, yeah, this messes with your chemistry in your brain and causes these issues. That's because of the drugs that you were subscribed. That's not an
yeah,
individual's fault. So
yeah,
there's definitely I have issues with broad scope laws and the fear. Like there's a lot of fear because for example, the big one is, oh, the Muslims are going to come and kill us all. It's like there's
yeah,
no Muslim violence in this country, basically none. That's a huge fear mongering trope, and
yeah,
we see that, and that's kind of I from what I've gathered is kind of why Standing Rock's a lot of people still are standoffish about, because they see, oh, these are brownish people. These aren't white people. So in the government, we keep seeing in the media that, oh, they shouldn't be worried about. They're probably just making stuff up for attention, and that's a big problem because they're still Americans. They're still human beings, and there definitely are issues going on that unfortunately, because I find it hilarious that all this is at the beck and call again of a corporation, Energy Transfer Partners, and Sunico, who are basically saying, "Hey, Morgan County Sheriff's Department, you now work for us." It's not, and this is unceded land. Like this is where they're
yeah,
at. They technically, as soon as the Army Corps of Engineers denied them the vertical transfer, the vertical drilling permits, they really have no right to be there. So technically, they are trespassing, and there's still helicopters there that were still there, and I was at the dome during the conversation, and I listened to everything that was being said, and there's just again, like, there's people don't want violence. Everyone at
yeah,
at the camp, no one there wants violence. They just want this all to stop.
yeah,
But it's just, to me, it's just disheartening, and hearing that individuals that go, some people saying that you're a disgrace to the uniform, and that's where they leave it. They can't say why, and I've I've honestly pushed back and said, how are they a disgrace to the uniform? Does anywhere in any kind of oath say you're only supposed to support a certain ethnicity of Americans? Like, I've never seen that. That does not exist. So
yeah,
and so that when I hear that kind of stuff and see that kind of stuff, I'm just like, no. If you're gonna say something like that, you're gonna have to give a direct example as of how and why what they're doing is being a disgrace, because that's from reading comprehension. That's not at all a disgrace to any kind of oath that is I've seen from police, military, or anything.
yeah. And you brought up another good point is about the Muslim thing they keep trying to push, and they keep trying to push. The whole Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, like all these different things. There's a number one rule in war: you divide and conquer, and the more they keep us divided, like the more they're going to be able to just continue on with everything they're doing. Like, people have to understand that, I mean, at Standing Rock, there were all colors there. All colors, all nationalities. I met people from England, from Ireland, from Norway, from all over the US. White, black, brown, it didn't matter. Um, we all understand that that is a message being pushed onto us by media, by the government, simply to keep us divided. And the reason why is because they're scared. They know if all of us understand that, hey, it doesn't matter what color I am, what religion I am, what political affiliation I am, I'm being screwed just as much as that person. Or maybe they're being screwed a little bit more. But it doesn't matter. We're all being screwed over from the same government, which is bought out by these corporations, which is bought out and owned by the banks. And it just goes on and on. And like it has to be that individual level that says, yo, like, I can continue fighting these quote unquote enemies that my government and media is trying to push on us, or I can start figuring out that those people aren't the ones who are passing laws and suppressing people's rights and freedoms.
That's
Like,
a huge point that I don't think a lot of people quite understand.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so that's what I mean when this is the first battle of the revolution. Like, it's a revolution in your thought process, in your mind. Like, we can, each of us, decide that, hey, we don't want this anymore. And we demand that from our government. And according to our laws, our government has to obey us. It gets its power from the consent of the governed. That's us. So if we say, we don't want this anymore, we want to do it like this, and they don't do that, that's when we can overthrow them. Now, throughout history, they've already shown that they're not doing the consent of the governed. But, like, people need to understand that it's us. It's us. Regardless if you're talking about the police, regardless if you're talking about National Guard, regardless if you're talking about active, retired military, vets, oil workers, if all of us just understand that basic thing, then we're the ones who can stop it.
And that's where I see a lot of problems, because it's, especially when it comes to Standing Rock, or because of what's happened on social media a lot. Individuals seemingly don't like hearing from a different perspective and being in a room and talking, just talking, not screaming. It's especially when it comes to, again, issues of Standing Rock. There's so much misinformation that's spread out there. Again, I'll point back to the LA Times. Because I basically witnessed that, and even in the article that they corrected the statement, it still didn't go into the violence that was being perpetrated on those at Camp Osage Sacramento. It's kind of ridiculous that we have to try to get past this supposedly credible outlet. They're not telling the entire truth, and so many people look at that, or some even a lot less credible outlets, and saying this is the truth. It's like, is it? Like, it's not. But and they'll shout back at you. This says that it is true, and it's not.
Yeah.
And then again, but when it comes to issues like Standing Rock, I mean, this is basically what Bernie Sanders' entire campaign was on. It was like, we have to represent people. We have to get together and talk and work out what's best, and let's take care of the people rather than millionaires and billionaires that are getting all their money off corporations that don't listen to people. And that's a huge problem. And as you said, this might be the first step, and I definitely hope it's not the last step, because these are things that, especially with the upcoming administration, that probably you need to see. What do you feel could be next for especially veterans that they could take part in and help? I know there was talk about Flint, and then there was talk about, and still in East Chicago and Indiana, there's still issues with lead and water. Like, what do you think could be the next thing that veterans could lend their hand to and try to at least get some attention to?
Well, I mean, I doubt wherever you live, you're going to have a hard time finding some big problems. I mean, there's plenty to go off of. As far as how you can get involved, how you can start something, how you can change something. Number one is you're going to have to start talking to people. You're going to have to start finding out what people are upset at. And from everyone I talk to, both at Standing Rock, on Facebook, just in my own personal life, I find that the majority of us are fed up with the government. I've talked to so many people who just don't watch the media at all anymore because they know it's completely fake. But the problem with that is you're not informed. You have no idea what's going on. So like we can't do these extreme points of view. Like we have to have a middle ground. And unfortunately, right now, that's looking and cross-examining multiple news sources in order to find out, a sliver of truth in there. But like looking out for those independent journalists, those people who are actually willing to be on the ground. Like, I mean, I stayed in the tent with you for several nights. Like, I mean, we talked over the fire, we shared food together, and got to, experience a pretty crazy blizzard and some pretty, eye-opening events. And I mean, I really hope I get back out there, and I know you do. Um, but you're going to have to start talking to people. You're going to have to find those connection points. Start with your friends. Start with your family. Um, we have to start somewhere. We have to start voicing our concerns. And some people may say that, like a world that people took care of each other, what a fantasy. But I don't know who said it, but I heard one quote that I absolutely love, and it's every reality, every reality has to be a fantasy first. So when you really think about that, you understand that it was a fantasy for someone to create an airplane. It was a fantasy for anything and everything. So the simple fact is, the more of us who are focusing on this fantasy world, we can make it a reality. And like that's how simple these things can be. We can actually start changing our farming methods, start changing our water conservation methods. We can start changing our waste management systems, all of these things, which will have a huge impact on our society, on our world. We can start changing the military industrial complex, the banking system, the Federal Reserve, the fractional reserve banking system. Like all of these things, which, when you really examine them, don't make a lot of sense. And so, to veterans out there, or, to non-veterans, veterans and non-veterans alike, I would say talk to your friends and family, and then find something that you'll care about. If there's a drilling site, a fracking site, nearby you, protest peacefully. Make sure you have people recording, and make sure you stay peaceful. Pray, beforehand. That's one thing at Standing Rock that I haven't seen in many other protests, is it's all surrounded by prayer. When we do direct actions, we pray before the direct action, and even during the direct action, sometimes we'll pray right there on the front line. Like, we have to do this not only for ourselves, but for future generations. We have to do this for the people overseas being bombed by our country, or being supplied weapons, or any of these things. Like, we each have to take it upon ourselves to actually try to make a difference. I mean, I'm trying to get back out to Standing Rock, but I'm having a big water leak in my house starting today, and all types of things. So it's really seeming like the universe doesn't want me to get back out there right away, and which is, kind of killing my spirit, because I feel like that soldier, that Marine, that airman, that Navy personnel who had to, for whatever reason, leave their brothers and sisters on the front line. And, like, that's all you long for, is to get back there. You want to keep them safe. You want to make sure you're able to do everything you can. But, like, we each have a path in this. We each have a job. Some people say, "Oh, I can't be on the front lines. I'm too old. I'm too sick. I'm too young." Well, that's fine. But you can spread awareness. You can talk to your friends and family. You can donate money or supplies. There are plenty of things you can do. There are all these different parts of the body, and they each do their own jobs. And to those individual parts, they may seem like they're tiny, they're insignificant. But without them, your body would have a much harder time. And together, they accomplish, a goal. And that's how we have to look at this. We have to start pursuing our paths and helping each other, and helping, to change this world, not just make it better for Americans, but for the whole world. I mean, America has been leading this charge for decades. Um, South America and Africa and the Middle East and Europe and everywhere. I mean, we've been leading a charge to make this an empire. And worldwide, we can all decide, like, these borders are imaginary lines. And there aren't these different races of people on this planet. We're one race. We're the human race. Just slightly different pigments and accents. But this world affects all of us. We all live on it, and we all need to, start taking care of our home. I mean, to not defend water, drinking water, clean drinking water, I mean, that's suicide. Like, how could you not defend something that every source of life needs? I mean, what does NASA do when they're going to a different planet? They check it for water. If it doesn't have water, it's not going to have life. There's no point in checking that out. Like, we have to start doing these things which affect all of us. We can't be so complacent. We can't be so lazy in this. We actually have to start doing something. Whatever that thing is, like, do it to the best of your ability. Like, start, instead of saying I support the troops, like, actually support them. Like, actually support the people who are out there and trying to fight for rights. And I say fight, but it's really just stand. We're just standing. We're standing like rocks. That's the whole point of the name of the camp, Standing Rock. You stand there like a rock, and you take whatever is thrown at you, simply to show the world that these are the true enemies. These are the terrorists. These are the people who are trying to violate rights for profit. And we need to start choosing people over profits. Like, we can't have you can't expect some kind of armed revolution without an actual mind change. You have to start looking at these problems. Um, yeah, so I mean, I just feel blessed, and I'm extremely thankful for being able to go out there, and I really hope I get back out there. But that's about it, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely hope I can figure out a way to get back out there as well, because it's honestly it was one of the first places I've been where whether your ethnicity, your religion, anything, it just did not matter. I never saw anyone look at anyone differently other than just see, do you need help? Can I help you with anything? Or do you want to talk? That happened a lot. Do you want to talk to me right now? That was, and it's a completely different feel of a place. And it's when I arrived, it was camp was huge, and no matter where you went on the camp, it was, yeah, everyone had the same mindset. We just want to talk and help people, and perfect strangers would not be strangers after 5 minutes, and it's just, that doesn't happen very many places, and at least that all have a same mindset and care about one another. It's not a fake
Yeah.
careness. That sometimes in the South you can find people who are just fake nice, but that there wasn't any fake nice there, and it was great. And if definitely, we should definitely speak again soon, and I definitely think there's a lot. Yeah, a lot of people will take away from this. And did you have anything that you wanted to say in closing?
um, I just want to, encourage people that we can do this. I mean, and all of us prefer that it stays peaceful and it doesn't get violent. Like I said, it's all about that mind shift, and do your part. Start talking to people, start talking to your friends and family, and we can turn this around. But we actually have to start doing stuff. We can't just sit here and complain about all of our problems and blame it on this politician or this politician. Because really the blame is squarely on our shoulders. That's where the responsibility is, and that's where the blame will be. That's exactly like our job is to voice what we want, and if it doesn't happen, then we make sure we have a government that's willing to listen to the people. And yeah, so I would just put a message of encouragement out there that we can do this.
And it was again, Seth. It was great talking to you, and I would definitely need to do this again, especially when you get back out there, because there's still a lot that needs to. People still need a lot of awareness of what's happening at Standing Rock, and I definitely don't plan on stop trying to cover it anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm actually. It's funny that this water damage happened today. I mean, we were actually getting ready to put our house on the market to try to sell it. I have this little enclosed trailer that I'm trying to get funds together for, and just hook my truck up to it, and we can go around and follow this movement, follow whatever protests, and have a little home on wheels slash office. So yeah, I would love to speak to you again, or anyone else who wants to talk. I mean, that's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to get that awareness out. We're gonna have to change our mindsets, and then we're actually gonna have to follow it up with action.
100% agree. And again, great talking to you.
All right, man. Thank you.